we have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVac engine, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. After stage separation, the MVac will ignite and carry the payload to its final orbit. The Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected via the black inner stage, which houses the MVac engine and the system that decouples the two stages during stage separation. And below that is the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off the ground through the lower, thicker part of the atmosphere. There are 8 engines arranged around one center engine and are collectively held in place by a structure called the octaweb. Each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust. After stage separation, Stage 1, also called the booster, will return to Earth for recovery and reuse on a future mission using a combination of the Merlin sea-level engines and the 4 titanium grid fins located near the top of the booster, which will guide it during its re-entry and landing. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that will deploy just before landing to allow for vertical touchdown on a drone ship or a landing pad. For today's mission, we'll be attempting to land this booster on our drone ship Just Read the Instructions, which is currently stationed in the Atlantic Ocean. And this mission will mark this booster's 15th launch and landing. Both the weather and vehicle continue to look good for today's launch out of Florida. Now to learn more about today's Türksat 6A payload on the pad, let's take a look at this video about the satellite and its mission.
Türksat 6A. It is not an ordinary satellite. The pride of 85 million. Turkey's largest R&D project. First domestic communications satellite manufactured by Turkey. Technology, communication, innovation, pride. Turkey's era in space is beginning. Türksat 6A meets space.
Coming up shortly, the transporter erector, or TE, will retract away from the Falcon rocket. The TE is that large truss structure you see there next to the vehicle.
Strong back lower has started.
Good call out there. First, we'll see the clamp arms open around the second stage, and then the TE will pull away from the rocket by a few degrees. And at T0, the ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE back from about 2 degrees to 45 degrees away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off to provide clearance for the vehicle. You should be able to make out those clamp arms open around the second stage. Now, the first stage is connected to a launch mount at the base of the TE, but the TE is hinged and will retract away from the vehicle in preparation for launch. The TE, or strongback, is designed to transport, raise, and support Falcon 9 at the launch pad. It's equipped with the umbilicals, or flexible lines, that are used to route the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry from the ground systems to the rocket and payload until Falcon 9 switches to internal power and clears the pad. At this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of rocket-grade kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Both the first stage and second stage should finish propellant loading about a minute apart from each other, with the first stage finishing up at the T-3 minute mark just a few moments from now, and the second stage finishing up at around the T-2 minute mark. As you may have noticed, there are white clouds forming around the vehicle, and those clouds are comprised of the chilled gas above the LOX tank that gets vented overboard to maintain pressure in the tank as needed. And when that vented oxygen mixes with the warmer Florida air...
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
And there's that call out that Stage 1 LOX loading is complete. When that vented oxygen mixes with the warmer Florida air, it condenses into the clouds that you see there on your screen. At the T-60 second mark, Falcon 9 will be in startup, and this means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers will have taken over the launch countdown, and then just inside of T-2 seconds, we'll light the M1D engines for liftoff. The Türksat 6A payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. The range is green. Now, as I mentioned earlier, weather was a bit of a watch item for us today, but things are now looking good for an on-time liftoff in 2 minutes. If for some reason we have to call a hold on today's launch, we have a backup opportunity scheduled for tomorrow at the same time. But for now, as I said, all systems continue to be go for launch. And with that, we're proceeding into the last few minutes of terminal count.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
And good call out there that Stage 2 LOX loading is complete. Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of rocket-grade kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Now we should be hearing that call out in about 30 seconds that Falcon 9 is in startup, which again is when the vehicle's autonomous flight computers will have taken over the launch countdown.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And there's that call out that Falcon 9 is in startup. We're now waiting for the final go from the launch director for today's mission.
Go for launch.
And there's that final go for launch from our launch director. At T-40 seconds and counting, all systems are go for the launch of Falcon 9. So let's sit back and watch as Falcon takes the Türksat 6A mission to space.
T-30 seconds. Seconds. T-10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go Türksat. Go Türksat.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
At T+30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 40 carrying the Türksat 6A satellite. Now, after clearing the tower, we'll tilt or gimbal the engines on the booster to initiate a roll maneuver, which you may notice in the Stage 1 camera view. This enables the vehicle's antennas to stay in the best position for communicating with the ground. And in just a few seconds, we'll be throttling down the engines in preparation for max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure. We should hear that call out in about 15 seconds from now.
Vehicle is supersonic. Max Q.
And there's that call out for max Q. Now, as Falcon 9 accelerates through the thicker lower atmosphere, the air density decreases. Falcon 9 passes max Q, the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure, once the air density lowers faster than the increasing speed of the vehicle. Now, as the rocket continues to ascend, be sure to watch the Stage 1 telemetry at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen to see the speed changes through ascent. The rocket typically needs to go 17,500
engine chill has started.
17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and get into orbit. Coming up shortly, we'll have 3 events coming up in quick succession, and we should hear all of these called out by Mission Control, starting with MECO, followed by stage separation, and then SES-1. Main engine cutoff, or MECO, is where we shut down all 9 M1D engines on the first stage to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, which is when the first and second stages of Falcon separate from one another. After Stage 1 shuts down its engines and separates from the second stage, the booster will begin to make its way back to land, descending under the acceleration of gravity until it's time to relight engines for the entry burn. And second engine start 1, or SES-1, is when we light the MVAC engine on the second stage for the first time. So watch out for these events happening just a few moments from now.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
And good callouts there for those 3 events, which again were main engine cutoff, or MECO, followed by stage separation, and then second engine start 1, or SES-1, on the second stage. And coming up in just a few moments, we should hear the callout for fairing separation. And as a reminder, the 2 payload fairing halves are encapsulating and protecting the payload right now, but once the vacuum of space is reached, they're no longer needed to protect the satellite and will get jettisoned away. That should happen momentarily.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there you heard that call out for fairing separation. We'll be attempting to retrieve both of these fairing halves once they fall back to Earth with our recovery vessel Bob currently stationed in the Atlantic Ocean. It's currently T plus 3 minutes and 50 seconds into today's mission. Now our next major milestone will be the first stage's entry burn, which will take place around the T plus 6 minute 16 second mark. Now to start the entry burn, we'll relight 3 of the M1D engines, which is similar to pumping the brakes to slow down the vehicle as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. The entry burn helps reduce the heat generated from the friction of the atmosphere and reduces the aerodynamic forces acting on Falcon, which helps maintain controlled flight and prepare for the landing burn. Now, during the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but it's still moving extremely quickly, and this causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, or plume, which deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle's surface. And that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses, and with each flight, the soot builds up a little more on the outside of the vehicle. The first stage supporting today's mission is flying for its 15th time today, having previously supported NASA CRS-26, Intelsat 40E, mPOWER 5 and 6, Ovzon 3, Eutelsat 36D, 1 OneWeb mission, and 8 Starlink missions. Now, as a reminder, on the left-hand side of your screen are views from our Falcon 9 booster, the first stage, and on the right side is the MVAC engine on the second stage. The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level, and these achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust each during ascent and descent. At liftoff, Falcon 9's first stage has thrust greater than 5 747 airplanes at full power. Now, the MVAC engine, with a much wider nozzle, is optimized to 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum. Coming up in just about 10 seconds from now, we should hear the startup of the entry burn on the Falcon 9 first stage.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
And there's confirmation of entry burn startup on the Falcon 9 first stage. This burn will last about 25 seconds and will slow the vehicle down in preparation for the landing burn coming up shortly.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And there's confirmation of stage 1 entry burn shutdown. Now coming up in just over a minute from now will be second engine cutoff, or SECO 1 on the second stage, along with the landing burn of the Falcon 9 first stage. The landing burn is the final burn of the Falcon 9 booster, and it's used to reduce the remaining speed of the vehicle in order to allow for a soft touchdown on the landing pad or drone ship. And as a reminder, we're attempting to land this booster on our drone ship Just Read the Instructions, which is currently stationed in the Atlantic Ocean.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
And good call out there. Now, the Falcon 9 booster isn't the only flight-proven aspect of this rocket today. The payload fairings supporting today's mission are also flight-proven, with one half flying for its 16th time and the other half flying for its 10th time.
Stage 1 transonic.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
And good callouts there. We're now waiting on callouts for SECO 1 and landing startup in just a few moments from now.
MVAC shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And good callouts there for MVAC shutdown and nominal orbital insertion of our second stage.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there's that call out for our stage 1 landing. As a reminder, this was the 15th launch and landing for this first stage, and this landing marks SpaceX's 328th recovery of an orbital class rocket, including both first stage landings for both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. And with confirmation of nominal orbital insertion, we'll now have a roughly 18-minute coast phase, and then we'll be back for our second engine start 2, or SES2, of the MVAC engine on the second stage at about the T plus 27-minute mark. So for now, enjoy some space tunes, and we'll see you back here for SES2. Hello and welcome back to our live launch coverage of the Türksat 6A mission. We're back from our first coast phase just in time for Second Engine Start 2, or SES-2. In just a few moments, we'll have a roughly 1 minute burn of the second stage MVAC engine, which is shown there on your screen.
MVAC ignition.
And there's that confirmation of SES-2 startup. This is the second burn of the MVAC engine on the second stage. The first burn took place around the T plus 2.5 minute mark and lasted about 5.5 minutes. This additional burn will place the Türksat 6A payload into the desired orbit for payload deployment. And as I mentioned earlier, the MVAC engine shown on your screen right now has a much wider nozzle than the sea-level M1D engines in order to have optimal thrust in vacuum. At full power, it's capable of 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum. We're expecting this burn to last about 15 more seconds.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And there we have confirmation of nominal orbital insertion. We now have a roughly 7-minute coast before arriving at payload deployment. So we'll see you back here at about the T plus 33 minute mark. Hello and welcome back. We're now at the T plus 33 minute mark in today's mission, and coming up next we have deployment of the Türksat 6A satellite. Just to recap today's mission so far, we had an on-time liftoff at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This was followed by stage separation about 2.5 minutes after launch. The first stage booster then returned to Earth and successfully landed on the drone ship Just Read the Instructions in the Atlantic Ocean about 8.5 minutes after takeoff. And we also had 2 successful ignitions and shutdowns of our second stage MVAC engine. Now, as a reminder, Türksat 6A is a geostationary Earth orbit, or GEO, communication satellite for the Republic of Turkey. Here's one more quick look at the payload ahead of deployment.
A new task. A new route. A new satellite. Turkey's era in space is beginning. First domestic communication satellite. Türksat 6A. This is the future.
We're now just about 40 seconds away from deployment of the Türksat 6A satellite. Now, Türksat 6A is the country's first fully domestic communication satellite and will extend coverage to regions such as India, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And with this satellite, the population reached by Türkiye satellites will expand from 3.5 billion people to 5 billion. We should be hearing call out for payload deployment in just about 15 seconds from now.
Payload deploy confirmed.
And there you heard and saw on your screen successful deployment of the Türksat 6A payload. And with that confirmation, we'll be bringing today's webcast to a close. Today's mission marks SpaceX's 364th overall mission to date and the 69th mission of this year. We want to thank the Republic of Turkey for entrusting us with today's mission and all of you for joining us today. And if you're interested in more launch coverage, be sure to check spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. Thank you and see you next launch.